I have a question for you. Was Jesus' first coming good or bad for people? Was it a blessing or a judgment? Or was it both? And Jesus' second coming, will it be good or bad for people? Will it be a blessing, a judgment, or both? See, here in Luke 12, I want to ask whether Jesus is talking primarily about his first coming, his second coming, or both. And how should we apply Jesus' warnings about judgment as people who are living between Jesus' first coming and second coming, which is where most of the church has spent their life. Even if Jesus comes back tomorrow, the majority of church history has been between these two events. Here's what Jesus said in Luke 12. Be dressed, ready for service, and keep your lamps burning, like men who are waiting for their master to return from a wedding banquet, so that when he comes and he knocks, they can immediately open the door for him. It will be good for the servants whose master finds them watching when he comes. I tell you the truth, he will dress himself to serve and will have them recline at the table and will come and wait on them. It will be good for those servants whose master finds them ready, even if he comes in the second or third watch of the night. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into. You also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you did not expect him. When you do not expect him. All right, you hear what Jesus is saying here? He said, be dressed, ready for service. That's gird up your loins, some older translations have it. That means, like for people wearing robes, that's having your robe wrapped around you and tucked in so you're ready to run. That's how the Israelites were supposed to eat the Passover the night before they left. They were supposed to be as ready to go. They had their shoes on. They had their sleeves rolled up. They had their running shoes on and their running shorts on. And Jesus says, I'm coming back. Keep your running gear on. And the point is to be ready, to be watching. Some versions say awake. Be awake. And you notice the elements that Jesus uses in other parables about his return? We've got lamps you're supposed to keep burning. We've got a wedding banquet that's being attended, and we've got watching. Those are elements of the story of the virgins who are waiting for their master to come to a wedding banquet. And it's interesting, in Jesus' parables, there's always a wedding banquet going on. And Jesus changes the details sometimes. Sometimes he's the groom. Sometimes he's attending the wedding. Sometimes he's throwing the wedding feast. This time he's coming back from a wedding feast. But you know what's there in all of them? There's a party going on, and Jesus is the one that this party is surrounding at all times. It's a banquet. It's a feast. And in this story, when he gets back, he is going to extend the feast to his own servants. Later on in Luke 17, Jesus is going to say, the way that it normally works when you're a servant and you've been working hard all day in the field with your master, and then you get home to the house, you still have to serve. It's normal for you to still be the one to prepare the meal and feed your master. But here, Jesus is saying he's the one who's going to feed and serve us. That's not normal. This is not the way that masters normally behave. This part of this parable, I think, is the part that people would have gone, wait, when the master gets back from the wedding, he's going to throw a feast for his own servants at his own house, and he's going to become the servant to them? Remember at the Last Supper, in John, we hear that Jesus washed the feet of his disciples. And in this parable, the master is becoming the servant of the servants. That sounds pretty good, right? But then Jesus throws this bonus parable in. Says, you're waiting, there's two ways you can describe what you're waiting for. You're either waiting for your master to come home from a wedding banquet and serve you a meal, or you're waiting for a thief to arrive in the middle of the night. And isn't that interesting? A lot of times a thief is used of the devil in John. But here, Jesus says that his own coming will be like a thief in the night. This is actually more common as a description of Jesus. It's connected, it probably comes from the thieves who came in the night in the book of Obadiah. In the same chapter where the idea of Jesus' coming, of God's coming, is described as the day of the Lord, there's also this idea of thieves coming in the night. And Jesus, over and over in the New Testament, says, I'm coming as unexpectedly as a thief coming in the night. And do you see why I'm asking the question that I'm asking here? Is Jesus coming good or bad for us? Jesus is implying here that if he comes and he finds you waiting for him as his servants, it's good for you. But there's also a way in which his arrival is going to be as devastating as a thief breaking into your house in the middle of the night. Okay? Now the question is also, Jesus' first coming is happening right now. But he's talking to the people who are here and saying, I'm coming. I'm coming right now. I'm arriving. Are you ready for me? Is my arrival in his first coming, is this me coming to serve you? Are you my servants, ready to be fed a meal? Or am I arriving as a thief? And you know what? This applies to his second coming also. Heaven is a banquet. We're being invited to the Lord's table early here because Jesus also says in Revelation that he's standing at the door and knocking, and he can come in and eat with us now. And he can serve us now. It's like the final wedding banquet. Jesus is bringing it early. You ever have your parents go out to eat? When I was little, my parents would sometimes go out to eat, and they'd bring us their leftovers from the meal. And we thought that was so cool. We get to eat the leftover restaurant food. This isn't leftovers, but this is like a preview of the wedding feast that we get to go to someday. Jesus is offering us that fellowship with him now and feeding us spiritually now. In the Lord's Prayer, we talk about him giving us his daily bread. When Jesus was tempted by the devil, he said, we live not just on bread alone, but by the word of God. Jesus feeds us spiritually and is offering this to us now between his first and second coming. Now, the parable continues by a question. Peter asked, Lord, are you telling this parable to us or to everyone? And the Lord answered, who then is the faithful and wise manager? Jesus isn't quite answering his question directly here. He's saying, which character in this parable are you? You tell me, Peter, which character are you? Who is the faithful and wise manager, whom the master puts in charge of his servants to give them their food allowance at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whom the master finds doing so when he returns. I tell you the truth, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose the servant says to himself, my master is taking a long time in coming. And then he begins to beat the men servants and the maid servants and to eat and drink and get drunk. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and an hour he is not aware of, and he will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the unbelievers. We'll talk about what that could mean in a minute. The servant who knows his master's will and does not get ready and does not do what his master wants will be beaten with many blows. But the one who does not know and does things deserving punishment will be beaten with few blows. For everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded, and from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked. Okay, so Peter's question after the original parable was, is this parable for us, just the disciples, or for everyone? He knows from Jesus' previous parables that Jesus tells parables to everyone, but oftentimes the explanation is only given to the disciples. And it's interesting, I think that if you ask Jesus if a parable applies to you, Jesus is likely to turn up the heat and really apply it to you. Remember the guy who asked, "Who is my neighbor?" Jesus told him a whole parable and ends with, "So, who are you going to be in that parable?" I think Jesus is doing the same thing here. He's saying, "Peter, who do you think you are in this parable? You think you're the master of the house? Not the master, the head servant? Well, then take care of the other servants. And that'll go well for you if you do what I say." Okay? Now, at Jesus' first coming, who had God left in charge of the spiritual feeding of Israel? The religious leaders. And Jesus has just been saying they are in big trouble for not having fed his people. In fact, they're stopping the people who are coming to Jesus, their true shepherd, and trying to stop him from feeding and caring for his own true sheep. In the Old Testament, Ezekiel 34 said, you shepherds, you leaders of Israel, you don't take care of the flock. You're just here to eat them. And then Jesus shows up, and that's what they're doing. They're even trying to prevent his sheep from getting to the true shepherd. Now, Jesus is turning to Peter and saying, if you want the position as a manager of this house, be a good manager of this house. Feed the people at the appropriate time. You notice this party, this feeding, this correct nourishing, but nourishing in a family is supposed to happen through the leaders. Peter, you want to be a leader in my house? Feed your fellow servants. Don't mistreat them. Okay? So for Jesus' first coming, this applied to the leaders who were already there. At Jesus' second coming, this will apply to those who are spiritually feeding and caring for others. And in between, Jesus said to Peter, after he denied Jesus and came back, he said, "Feed my sheep." And Paul, at the end of his ministry in Acts 20, says to the elders of the church, "Feed the sheep God's given to you." And Peter, when he talks about this at the end of 1 Peter, says, "Feed the sheep." And so you know what? I've got food for you. The food is Jesus. And we're gonna eat at the Lord's table. But I'm here to give out the gospel to you. In Jesus, all your sin is forgiven. This is the food, Jesus himself, that you eat by believing in him, that we're supposed to give to each other. You want in on this? You want to be one of the head servants who's feeding the others? Give each other Jesus. That's what he's asked us to do. And then, oh, by the way, I said we talk about what this cutting into pieces means. Some people think this is referring to really big cutting, like cutting a covenant, like the cutting sacrifices, like you're getting chopped in half. Some people think that this might even be referring to like chopping up garbage and throwing it out. There's also a possibility that this cut is a synonym for the beating that's happening here. You're getting cut up by a whip. I don't know. But at any rate, what he's talking about is this possibility of it being bad for you that Jesus arrives is there. We usually don't think about that, do we? Jesus is saying it can be good for you or bad for you. Now, I'd like you to notice two more things here too. He describes this servant as a faithful servant. You hear a word in there? Faith. And if he doesn't do his master's will and feed his fellow believers, he'll be treated like an unbeliever. You hear those faith words in both of those cases? Jesus is still describing himself as the master and the one who is giving the meal, and we know that Jesus is the meal. Jesus is what we put our faith in. And the words for describing how to be this person is a manager of faith. Putting our faith in Jesus ourselves and then giving Jesus to each other is what Jesus is asking for us in this parable. Then Jesus continues, "I have come to bring fire on the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. But I have a baptism to undergo, and how distressed I am until it is completed. Do you think I came to bring peace on earth?" Yeah, I do. I did think that's why you came, Jesus. "No, I tell you, but division. From now on, there will be 5 in one family, divided against each other. 3 against 2, 2 against 3. They will be divided. Father against son, son against father, mother against daughter, daughter against mother, mother-in-law against daughter-in-law, daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. I found some commentators who tried to count up the people, and they think maybe the mom got counted twice because there's 6 people here, and maybe she's the mother and the mother-in-law. I don't think that doing the math is necessarily the point of this parable. The point is that Jesus coming, his first time and his second time, is a point of division. Jesus said he came to bring a fire on the earth. A fire, do you remember at his baptism, the fire is both the Holy Spirit and it is judgment. It's a fire of refining. It's a fire burns up what's temporary and it hardens what's permanent. And the fire is the dividing thing. It's the thing that's removing the chaff from the wheat. Jesus came for this fiery judgment event, ultimately. But he says he has a baptism to undergo first. He's not talking about the fact that he's already been baptized. He's talking about what that baptism means. Remember that when John the Baptist was baptizing people, it was a line for sinners. And Jesus came and he got in the line for sinners. And John the Baptist said, "What are you doing? This line is for sinners. You're not a sinner." And Jesus said, "I have to fulfill all righteousness. I'm trading. I'm coming to be the one who is treated as a sinner." He's the one who's going to be baptized by dying and rising for real for the sin and taking our sin on himself. That's what he means by his baptism. He's coming to be sin for us so that we might become the righteousness of God. And this is a dividing line. This divides people. Right down to the middle of families, right down to the middle of Jesus' own family. Remember, his family has come to try to tell him he's maybe going a little too far with this whole preaching thing. Maybe he shouldn't have done that. Whether you believe in Jesus or not will cause divisions. It did at Jesus' first coming, it will before Jesus' second coming, and it will all of the time in between. But hear this, it's worth it. Jesus said that we have to hate by comparison. Don't actually hate your parents, don't actually hate your life, but by comparison, by how much you love Jesus and how much you're committed to going to his banquet, it should look like hatred by comparison of anyone else. Can you imagine a family saying, "Why don't you do this with us? Why are you against us?" It still happens today. And you know what? Again, it's worth it. It's worth it to go to the banquet. It's worth it to be part of Jesus' family. Okay? Then Jesus said to the crowd, "When you see a cloud rising in the west, immediately you say, 'It's going to rain.' And it does. And when the south wind blows, you say, 'It's going to be hot.' And it is." Hypocrites. That's a strange way to end that, isn't it? Why is it hypocritical to be able to predict the weather? Here's why. You know how to interpret the appearance of the earth and the sky. How is it that you don't know how to interpret this present time? His time, his day, his first coming. They're not recognizing him coming at that time. Why don't you judge for yourselves what is right? As you're going with your adversary to the magistrate, try hard to be reconciled to him on the way, or he may drag you off to the judge, and the judge turn you over to the officer, and the officer throw you into prison, and I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. Okay? Do you hear him talking about interpreting it? This is, again, his time. It's hypocrisy that's compared to the yeast of the Pharisees. He just called hypocrisy the yeast of the Pharisees. You want to be like the Pharisees, just look at what I'm doing right now and pretend like it's not happening. You know something is going on, Jesus says. He's here. Then the cloud rising in the west. Do you remember when Elijah it hadn't rained for 3 years, and he has his servant go and check, and when they finally see a cloud coming up out of the Mediterranean, Elijah knows, okay, the rain is coming, and they can watch the rain come. And the other thing Jesus said is when the hot southeast wind is coming, you know it's going to be hot. And here's the interesting thing about rain or sunshine. They can be good or bad. Remember the flood came in the rain. And that where Jesus is describing his second coming as heat. But these are good things. I imagine you had the heat on at your house this morning, right? Rain is good for our trees. Heat, we go out of our way to spend money to make sure that we're warm enough. But these can also be pieces of judgment. And Jesus is saying they don't recognize what's happening. He invites them to do 3 things here. He says, judge for yourselves. And parables ask us to do this. Remember in the parable of the Good Samaritan, he says at the end of it, who are you going to be? Which guy is like his neighbor? Parables force us to make a judgment on the person in the parable, and when we do, we're actually passing the judgment on ourselves. Jesus says at the end of one of his parables about the servants who won't give the produce back to the master, what should the master do if the people are killing his own son? And they say, yeah, he should come and kill them. And Jesus says, you've pronounced your own doom. David did this, Nathan did this with David. So Jesus is asking us in these parables, who do you want to be? Judge for yourself. If you're on your way to the judge with your adversary, you're going to get right with him before you get there? Settle this out of court. You're going to lose the court case. And it's interesting that this word for adversary or enemy is often applied to the devil. Remember the thief was like the devil? Adversary is a word for the devil. But you know what? In this case, we're supposed to be reconciled to this enemy. This isn't the devil. We're supposed to be reconciled to God before we get to the judgment. This is your chance. Be reconciled before you get there. You still have chance to settle out of court. Do you want God as your friend or as your enemy? Now's the time to make that decision, Jesus is saying. Judge for yourself, interpret the times, be reconciled to God. Now, this applied at Jesus' first coming. Jesus is going to say in a few more chapters in Luke that Jerusalem was destroyed because God was trying to gather them together like a mother hen gathering her chicks underneath, and they didn't want any part of it. He's coming, offering to save them, and they don't want any part of it. And because of that, they're destroyed. And at Jesus' second coming, likewise, this is what we usually apply this verse of understanding the signs of the times to. Christians have shown for the last 2,000 years that correctly understanding and interpreting the signs of Jesus' second coming is a challenge, right? Christian history has borne that out. We do need to be ready. But the point of this parable applies for all the time between Jesus' first and second coming. Now is the time when you can settle out of court with the judge. He's given you his own son. He's died for you. And Jesus described himself earlier here as the Son of Man, who's the son of the judge of the final judgment in Daniel 7. Jesus is the judge. And last week we saw that when someone came asking Jesus to be a judge of a petty matter of an inheritance dispute between two brothers, Jesus said, I don't want to be that kind of a judge. But you know what kind of a judge Jesus is? He's the judge, the one we actually have to get right with. And now is the time to do it. And if we do, we're not just no longer in trouble with the judge. We're invited over to the judge's house where he will serve us. He turns from adversary into master who serves us. He turns from thief coming in the night to master returning to feed us from a wedding banquet in the night. Now's the time to be reconciled to this judge. That's how this applies to us between Jesus' first and second coming. In the parable of the coming master, we're told to be ready. Heaven is a banquet, but we can eat with Jesus now. In this purpose of Jesus coming to be baptized and to bring fire, we learn that Jesus is dividing by his actions. And it will either be good for us or bad for us based on whether or not we're reconciled to him. And then what we really have at the end here is the pressure of Jesus coming. We have to interpret the time, judge for ourselves, and be reconciled to him now. That's the point of all these parables. Do you want God as a friend or as an enemy? And you know what? As we come to Jesus' table, the Lord Jesus' table, the same is true here. Jesus is here to feed us. Remember when Jesus fed the 5,000 and then he said, I'm the real food that I'm giving you to eat? Jesus is still the real food that we eat by believing in him. And he's here for us to eat him. But we can either come to him accepting the nutrition that he's giving us, accepting him as our only life. If your only way of being reconciled to the judge is by putting your full hope in Jesus to die for you, because you know that if you do this on your own, you deserve to be cut to pieces and treated like an unbeliever. If you're coming to Jesus that way, this food of Jesus is for you, and all your sins are forgiven. If you're coming any other way, Jesus is coming like a thief in the night. If you think you can face him alone on your own, if you think you can face the judgment on your own, defend yourself, you're going to be in big trouble. And coming close to Jesus will be harmful to you, not helpful to you. But I want to tell you this, guys. Jesus is here for you. In Jesus, all your sin is forgiven, and he's the one inviting you to come and eat him.